Welcome to my channel. Today we take you inside a moment that shook everyone in the room, a moment that turned silence into sobs and pride into tears. The title says it all. Donald Trump arrives at a military hospital. What he does next brings tears to everyone's eyes. But the story behind this moment is far deeper than headlines. It all began on a quiet Tuesday morning at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. No fanfare, no press conference, no advance notice. Just a convoy of black SUVs that rolled through the gates and came to a stop outside the main entrance. Out stepped Donald J. Trump, not with his usual media entourage, but alone, flanked by two aides and a single Secret Service agent. To onlookers and staff, it seemed like a routine visit. Perhaps a meeting with doctors, maybe a health check. But what unfolded inside those walls was anything but routine. Trump walked slowly through the corridors of the hospital. He wasn't there to speak, not yet. He wasn't there for political gain or to talk policy. He was there for something much more human. First, he made his way into Ward C, the traumatic injury unit. In that room lay 6 service members. Men and women, some missing limbs, others recovering from brain injuries, burns, and blast trauma. Most were in their 20s. All had seen war. Trump paused at each bedside, and what struck everyone watching wasn't what he said, but how he listened. For once, the man known for dominating conversations, commanding attention, and making headlines simply stood in silence. He held hands. He bowed his head. And when one soldier, barely able to speak, asked if Trump would say a prayer, he did. The staff expected him to move on quickly, but he didn't. He pulled up a chair. And for the next hour and a half, he stayed. Not as the former president, not as a businessman or a political figure, but as a fellow American talking to heroes who gave up everything. Then came the moment that changed everything. He asked if he could address all the patients and families in the central recovery room. Chairs were brought in. Nurses gathered. Even some doctors took off their coats and stood quietly at the back of the room. And that's when Trump reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a stack of handwritten letters, one for each of the injured soldiers in that room. Each letter was personally addressed, not typed. Not signed by a staffer, but written in Trump's own handwriting with small, shaky imperfections that made it clear these were not for show. One letter read, "You don't know me, but I know men like you. I have seen what your sacrifice gives this country, and while the news may forget you, I will not this. Your pain is a badge of honor. Your future will be stronger than your past. America doesn't just owe you a thank you. We owe you everything." As the letters were passed out, several soldiers, many who hadn't cried through their surgeries, through their recovery, or even their deployment, began to weep, quietly, uncontrollably. And then Trump did something no one expected. He took off his coat, unbuttoned his shirt cuff, and rolled up his sleeve. Beneath it, on his forearm, was a fresh tattoo, barely a few days old. It read, "Semper Fidelis," Latin for Fidelis, Latin for always faithful, the motto of the U.S. Marine Corps. No one saw it coming. Not his aides, not the press, not even the hospital staff. He said quietly, "They say I never served. But today, I carry your spirit on my skin. For every soldier who gave more than I ever could, this is my salute to you." The room was silent, and then a Marine in a wheelchair began to clap. One by one, others joined in. Some cried, some stood. A nurse sobbed in the corner. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about left or right. That day in that room, it was about something deeper, the invisible thread that binds a nation to its defenders. And a man who, for all his controversies, showed a moment of rare, raw human truth. He stayed until the last soldier had his letter. He shook every hand, hugged every mother, took no photos, gave no interviews. And then, just as quietly as he came, he walked out the door into his car and disappeared down the road. But I've never seen a room full of wounded warriors cry the way they did today. Whatever your politics, today we saw something real. It's easy to judge a man by his words. But sometimes it's his actions, when no one's watching, that define him. As Trump's motorcade pulled away from the hospital that evening, those left behind were still grappling with what had just happened. Word of his unannounced visit began to spread, but not through media outlets or press releases, through whispers, tears, and heartfelt messages from those who were there. Inside the hospital, something had shifted. One nurse said later, "We deal with pain and tragedy every day. But that visit reminded us that these men and women aren't forgotten, that someone still sees their struggle, their scars, their courage. One of the recovering soldiers, Private First Class Marcus Hill, who had lost both legs in a wide explosion in Afghanistan, told his father on the phone, "Dad, I didn't cry when they told me I'd never walk again. But I cried when he read that letter to me, because for once, I didn't feel like just another broken soldier. I felt seen." The tattoo Trump revealed that day made headlines later when a photo leaked from an aide who had taken it discreetly, intending to keep it as a private memory. The image went viral within hours, and as it spread, so did something unexpected: respect from those who had once opposed him. Veterans across the country began sharing the image with messages like, "Politics aside, this was powerful. Whatever you think of him, that took guts." He didn't have to do that, but he did. But the story didn't end at Walter Reed. 1 week later, each of the soldiers Trump had visited received a package. Inside was a personalized challenge coin, designed by Trump himself, featuring the American flag on one side and on the other. A quote that read, "A pain is temporary. Honor is forever. You are not forgotten." And beneath that, a DT's 45th president. Accompanying the coin was another letter. This one read, "There will be days when the pain feels louder than your courage, but on those days I want you to remember, you stood for America when many wouldn't even stand up. That makes you unbreakable. In my book, Donald J. Trump." For many of those veterans, that letter found a permanent place beside their medals, tucked into bedside drawers or framed on hospital room walls. Then slowly, something extraordinary began to happen. Morale in the trauma unit lifted. One nurse noted that 2 of the soldiers who had refused physical therapy for weeks suddenly asked to start again. Another began painting. A third, whose wounds had left him nearly mute, began speaking in short, raspy sentences. His first word, letter. Media eventually caught wind of what had happened, but unlike previous Trump stories that often stirred outrage, this one sparked something else: humility, reflection, and humanity. Even late-night talk show hosts, usually critical of Trump, paused to acknowledge the impact of that visit. One says, "Say if we had more moments like this in politics, more real, unfiltered human moments, maybe we'd start to heal in more ways than one." In a rare show of unity, veterans groups from both sides of the aisle released a joint statement. Today, we witness not a political gesture, but a patriotic one. We salute any leader who takes time to uplift our wounded warriors with compassion and humility. But perhaps the most powerful reaction came not from a soldier or a journalist, but from a 7-year-old girl named Clara. Her father, Sergeant Tom Reeves, had been in that hospital room the day Trump visited. He had suffered massive injuries in Syria and hadn't spoken to his daughter in over a month due to trauma and surgeries. Clara, after seeing her dad in a video wiping tears during Trump's visit, sent a crayon-drawn letter addressed to Mar-a-Lago. It read, "Dear Mr. Trump, thank you for making my daddy smile again. He said your letter helped him be brave. I want to be brave like him too. Love, Clara." Trump responded with a handwritten letter of his own, along with a teddy bear and a little Marine uniform. "Dear Clara, your daddy is one of America's greatest heroes. And from your letter, I can tell you're going to grow up to be just as brave as him. Keep shining. Keep smiling. Keep smiling, Donald J. Trump." It was a small act, yet one that would be remembered by a family forever. In the end, this story wasn't about politics. It wasn't about power or headlines or image. It was about presence, real presence, real presence. About what happens when a public figure steps out of the spotlight and into the quiet, sacred space of sacrifice, with nothing but respect in his heart and time in his hands. That day, in a hospital filled with pain, Donald Trump gave something far more meaningful than promises. He gave something no camera could fake. He gave dignity, and he reminded everyone watching that, no matter where we stand in the political spectrum, honor still matters. Thank you for being with us today. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for politics, not for clicks, but to keep these moments of humanity alive, because they deserve to be remembered.